when the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I were separated, and I was, basically shut down watching television. Finally got to watch The Wire. Excellent show. That's a backstory to yesterday afternoon. This is the first in a series of shows devoted to David Simon. Not shows, segments. They will occur as information appears. Over at HughHewitt.com, there's an email button. Contact Hugh. If you've got any information for me on this story, send it there. Put in the subject matter line, David Simon. Here's the backstory. Yesterday, I get a ping in my post-show nap, and it's from a listener who says, boy, did you get under the skin of David Simon? To which I honestly replied, who's David Simon? Because unlike Sonny Bunch, who's coming up later this hour, I actually have no idea who produces and writes television dramas because I tend to forget them. Now, I think parts of The Wire I'll never forget. It's great television. It's one of the best television series ever made. But of course, like all television series, they become laugh-in after a while. But I didn't know David Simon produced it. And so I had Matt Continetti on yesterday, and we had a great conversation about the problems with the impeachment trial of the president. And someone named Eric Kleefeld, a nobody I don't know, and Eric has got a grand total of, well, I don't know, 5 followers. I honestly do not know. Clipped it, took a little bit of it, and said, Hugh Hewitt says jurors shouldn't be on any case. Now, what I had actually said to or had discussed with, now I can't find any of this stuff. What I had really actually discussed with Matt Continetti was the difficulty in American jurisprudence, or indeed any setting, whether it's criminal, civil, or non-judicial proceeding. We never allow victims to serve as the jurors, even not like the high school disciplinary proceedings. We just don't let it. So Eric, this fellow I don't know, had written, Hugh Hewitt says the media should tell the public a major problem with the Senate impeachment trial. Victims ought never to be juror. His guest, Matt Continetti, one of the smartest people in America, replies, the mob targeted the elected officials of the United States, and there's no way I think of getting out of that situation. So in arrives David Simon. Like I said, never talked to the guy, never knew of him. Threaten, hunter, kill those in the first branch of American government, and they can never, ever impeach you for it. F checks and balances. This is the excellent political theory for a republic. Rare is a perfect a-hole, also a pristine moron, but Hugh Hewitt is a magical beast. Now, I've never met him, but I tweeted back when this was pointed out to me. Journalist, TV writer, and a superb one at that, doesn't understand the law generally, Constitution specifically, or due process at all. Fancy that. There's a surprise every day among the TDS afflicted. But thanks for The Wire. Enjoyed it, finally, during the shutdown. Superb work. Using the Proverbs, soft word turns away wrath. Didn't work. Came back. My invective with regard to useless gibbering F-bonnets is never mindful. And with the possible exception of Dinesh D'Souza and eschewing all other hyperbole, you are the dumbest rock in the Trumpian bucket, delivering a show fit only for dead-brained mouth breathers. That would be you, my friends. But trying to, and I replied, tell you what, David, when you are free of mindless invective, have returned to Baltimore's black community all that you appropriated from it, and undone damage you did to the city, come on my show and demonstrate your correspondence course grasp of the Constitution. Good show, though. To which he responded, as to my supposed appropriation from Baltimore, which actually cannot be denied, why, yes, I have exploited the S out of the city where I live and worked as a journalist covering the drug war. Also have exploited recon Marines, New York housing officials, porn stars and pimps, jazz musicians, police, mayors, and I hope to have the opportunity to exploit the S out of more cohorts before my career ends. The stories are political and therefore rooted in realities. Baltimore is damaged not by narratives that speak to its problems, but by problems and lack of solutions. And I respond, of course, David, you're a redeeming angel, a saint among men, and not a reflexive partisan suffering from TDS who cannot understand the plain language of the Constitution or admit to a David Milch envy so vast that every tweet is overwritten. Have another drink, read a bit. Not kind on my part, I admit it. Then David kind of went off the edge. It's not 5 o'clock and your mother has me slated in for 3 o'clock, he writes Hugh. So I'm going to hold off on the shot and the beer, thanks. As restless and as inventive as she is, I'll need all my wits about me best. Now, of course, that is third grade level, seventh grade level, maybe. To which I responded, I quoted from a story on David Simon, which had concluded, David Simon took to replying and furthering his points, but seemed to make everything that much worse. That made him mad. Oh, Hugh, you droll little mook. Just remember to at least speak well of me when you come up from the basement to liberate my cash from your mother's purse. People criticized him at that point. He said, well, to be fair, your pretty mom, someone told him, you're in a hole, stop digging, David. He said, well, to be fair, your mom pretty much demanded I keep going, Dave. And then another person criticized him for ad hominem attack. He said, let's be fair here. I began this by happily calling him a submoronic mediocre hack, which is ad hominem as one can get. On the other hand, he is a submoronic mediocre hack. Empiricism was yoked in the harness of abuse. Sad person David Simon is. David can't resist replying, well, who wouldn't be deeply aggrieved at having you so cleverly compass me to your 4 followers? It got worse over the next few hours. He said to me, you really might want to workshop this week, F nuts. Maybe a Ramada Lodge out near the airport. He's putting on his tough cop act. The late set generally brings out a more forgiving crowd. Hewitt, you hollowed little out F-squib. You've crossed the only Rubicon that truly matters here. In your transparent attempt to cater to the beessed and bespittled deplorati, who easily squee at any half-assed trope that imagines decadent and violettes, you have wantonly, don't want to miss this correctly, you have wantonly slandered me through a linkage to the Hollywood locale. I had mentioned Hollywood people are unusually abusive on Twitter. If you ever get a single lonesome fact correct in your entire fecal-flecked career of rote hackery, and that is an ambition to exceed your entire skill set, know this, I live and work in Baltimore, Maryland, where the citizenry make a point of pausing in our routine of nightly intramural violence and disorder whenever we catch the scent of a true and enduring piece of S edging over the city line, whereon we close ranks and hunt that low F person en masse, bag him live, then barter him off in pieces for crack vials and bags of Utz crab chips. So yes, you dumb S-licking whelp of a media horse, stay where you are or keep hunting for me in West L.A., because Baltimore is not your speed, as neither are facts in reality. And it goes on. So at that point, I changed my mind. And I told him, look, I'm going to go all Ted Lasso on you, David. Something's wrong with that guy. So I started to read up on it. And that's where I asked for your help. A couple of people, by the way, who know him wrote me in the course of this saying, not a well man, and don't get involved in it. And I said, no, I'm not interested. David Judah Simon was born February 9th, 1960, so he just turned 60 2 days ago. That might have something to do with it. He worked as a reporter after graduating from the University of Maryland. And, reporters often love their work and stay in their work, or they hate their work and they drink a lot and they aspire to be something else. Well, he wrote a couple of good books, got the 2010 MacArthur Award for being a genius. He wrote the book, The Corner, and I went back and listened to some interviews. He was not abnormal in the 90s. They made it into an HBO miniseries. Born in D.C., he was raised in a Jewish family at a bar mitzvah. His family roots are Russia, Belarus, Hungary, Slovakia. He had a sister, Linda Evans, who died in 1990, so there's some trauma here. More trauma. His father was held hostage when he was in high school in a fairly famous incident here in D.C. So he was raised in D.C. or went to high school here. He wrote for the Tatler, and he graduated in 1973 from the University of Maryland. Got a job at the Baltimore Sun because he apparently did a piece that was harmful to Lefty Drizel. And that got him somewhere, and he called journalism God's work, so he got a hero complex. Then he wrote Homicide, A Year on the Killing Streets, which did pretty well. Then he got The Wire after making Homicide for a few years on HBO. And The Wire became one of the greatest television series ever. So then you mix Hollywood into this sort of media resentment. He's also kind of a low-end Marxist. and you end up with explosive anger that I'll explain after the break.
This is Albert Mohler for Townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
They equate believing that the election was illegitimate with treason and being an insurrectionist and so on. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what my side believes or your side believes. I care the way people act. How many Democrats believe that the election was not stolen from Hillary Clinton? The whole point of the Russian collusion lie was to prove that it was an illegitimate election. Putin won. Remember? Putin, not Trump. Telling all Americans over and over and over police are racist does not lead to fatal riots, the burning down of businesses and police cars. That does not lead to that. But this is a cover-up for the violence of the left. That's the way it should be regarded. I wish we had the male-female hour today. I apologize to you. I apologize to me. I apologize to males and females listening. I cannot control the events outside. I can only control how I react. And this is a time of crisis wherein my normal programming is deferred.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
So you're Donald Trump, and it appears you lost the election. But you're hanging by a thread. There's a shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a speech, an incendiary speech. I'm going to make a whole bunch of my supporters go insane, go berserk. I'll send them to the Capitol building. They'll trash the place. The Democrats will go, oh, my goodness, I guess Donald Trump is really, really serious about believing the election was stolen. Maybe we should take a look at this. We take another look at it. The evidence is overwhelming. The election was stolen. Let's have him stay there 4 more years. Really? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll send a whole bunch of my supporters. I'll trash the place, put a lot of negative footage up there, and Americans are going to go, you know what? If this man doesn't get 4 more years, he'll burn the whole country down, so let's keep him there. Really? You think that looked good for him? You think that advanced his agenda? Think having that little idiot with the Viking hat help Donald Trump 4 more years down the road? And the story came out, says the guy's sorry. Said I should have been better dressed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about this. It was very serious and very scary. And people died.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, part one of my David Simon series. And this will go on again. If you know anything about David Simon and his backstory or what's going on in his life, that you can tell me without breaching confidential relationship. I don't want his doctor or his lawyers talking to me, obviously, although some journalists do that. I don't know how he practiced journalism. I don't do that way. Just hit the, go to HughHewitt.com and hit the email me button. So back to the bio of David Simon before he went crackers on me yesterday. I mean, most of his friends said, really? Mother jokes? Doing your mother upstairs? My mom's been dead since 1997, so I don't really get upset about that at 65. I note he turned 60 this week, so maybe part of this is age cracking up on somebody. But after The Wire, he produced Treme, which was, some people liked it, was pretty much a failure. Then he did Show Me a Hero, which nobody remembers. Then he did The Deuce, which become wrapped up in the Me Too movement problem. In one of my mean tweets, I said, friend of Harvey's. I don't know if he is or not, but I probably shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry, David. There's no evidence that he's friends with Harvey Weinstein, and he's never himself been accused of any inappropriate conduct except Twitter rage. And then 2 years ago, he did The Plot Against America, which was a failure. And so he described as having in development Parting the Waters, which is a very famous book, great book. Hope he gets it made. The Avenue, The Good Friday Plot, Capitol Hill, Legacy of Ashes. Tim Weiner's been a guest on this show for a long time ago. Great book. Hope he gets that made. The Pogues and A Dry Run, The Lincolns in Spain. Tells you a little bit there. Simon is known for his realistic dialogue and his journalistic approach to writing. I listened to a 97 interview with him, and actually it just sounds like the new journalism warmed over, but journalism is journalism. It's who, what, where, when, and how. He's described himself as a social democrat, broadly supporting the existence of capitalism while opposing raw, unencumbered capitalism, absent any social framework, absent any sense of community, without regard to the weakest and most vulnerable classes in society. So it's sort of sixth grade political science. And in 2013, he compared the global surveillance disclosures uncovered by Snowden, the spy, to a 1980s effort in the city of Baltimore to record the numbers dialed from payphones. Sure it was. So there's his background. So I began to think, after he went really nuts yesterday, implied threats, the mother stuff, what's wrong with this guy? I mean, I've done back and forth on Twitter with Hollywood. I got a lot of friends in Hollywood. I'm in California now. I lived in California for many, many years, and many, many names and big names, and flown around the country with them. We used to do a retreat for believers in Hollywood every year, and they brought me along because someone has to be the least cool guy in the room. And I respect their work. Like I say, The Wire is probably the best television I've ever seen, though some people say The Americans is better. I don't think so. But my Christian guilt began to get on me, and I began to pray for this guy, and I asked all my friends to do that. I don't see any signs of faith here, though he refers to Talmudic scrutiny in other places, but that can just be a trope. And I wonder, what do you think is wrong with people on Twitter who do this, who are triggered by Trump and then act like Trump? This morning's news brought word of the Lincoln Project and its meltdown, and it's in complete freefall. Maggie Astor, and you can go to my timeline to read this. Maggie Astor has demonstrated a complete, utter meltdown this morning. The Lincoln Project is hiring an outside group to investigate John Weaver's tenure there, and 6 former employees and associates are calling on Lincoln Project to release them from their non-disclosure agreements. Now, when you hear about non-disclosure agreements, you think Trump, right? Turns out a lot of people are beginning to wonder about the group's claims that they didn't know about John Weaver's behavior, and those stories are all linked. And they've got him under non-disclosure, and the money's coming out, what they did with all the money they raised. So the Lincoln Project is beginning to act like Trump, too, with their non-disclosure agreements. And David Simon acts like Trump on Twitter. And I'm beginning to wonder if the same things, the same demons that bedeviled the former president, bedevil his most obsessive critics. I'm going to ask Sonny Bunch about that. But again, if you know something about David Simon that can explain his meltdown, his anger, his just kind of unhinged approach to people, send it to me over at HughHewitt.com. I'll be right back.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I want to talk to you about where we are in the culture and in the nation right now. So talk to us. What are you thinking?
As you know, I reaffirmed my faith in Jesus Christ when I was going through this crucible of being tortured in a politically motivated prosecution by Robert Mueller. Now, I know you missed this, Eric, along with everybody else in the country, but at midnight on Election Day, the busiest news day of the year, the Department of Justice released the last unredacted sections of the Mueller report regarding Roger J. Stone Jr. And you know what they said? They never had any factual evidence whatsoever against me regarding the Russians, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, stolen emails, John Podesta, nothing. They had nothing. Now, who releases something at midnight? So in other words, the big media outlets, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the people who posted headlines blaring that I was a Russian agent, none of them cover this moment. It gets covered by The Guardian and it gets covered by BuzzFeed only because BuzzFeed brought the lawsuit which required the Justice Department to finally unredact this information. To take it to modern day terms, yes, I was in Washington. I spoke on January 5th. I actually never left my hotel room at all on January 6th. I wasn't on the ellipse. I didn't march to the Capitol. I wasn't at the Capitol. I was as horrified as every American to see acts of violence there.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Heechen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Heechen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The reason that I am having trouble with the argument is the American people just spoke, and they just changed administrations. So in the light most favorable to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here, their system works. The people are smart enough, in the light most favorable to them, they're smart enough to pick a new administration if they don't like the old one. And they just did. And he's down there, Pennsylvania Avenue now.
If you were wondering, that's not the White House legal counsel. Just in case you were wondering. That person, whether you say, oh, the American people are so wise they chose Joe Biden. Allegedly, that's Bruce Castor, who, according to reports, works for the 45th President of the United States. Why he spent time on that argument yesterday? Your job is not to praise the last election, it's to deal with the charge of incitement to insurrection. Now, I looked at this guy's bio. He has he was a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, put some very bad people away, including murderers. But what happened to him? Again, from yesterday, This is Bruce Castor talking about one of our founding fathers. Video cut 2. Play cut.
Paraphrasing the famous quote from Benjamin Franklin, who, as a Philadelphian, I feel as though I can do that because he's my founding father too.
He's my founding.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The impeachment trial will proceed. Dun, dun, dun. Big vote yesterday. That's one headline in USA Today. Huge font, trial to proceed. Chilling video, managers open by reviving riot. And then the vote was taken, 56-44. 6 Republicans joined with the Democrats.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Time for Sonny Bunch, the official movie critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Serendipitously scheduled for the first installment in my Who is David Simon and What the Heck's Wrong with Him series. Sonny, before I go there, let me tell you, I watched the Little Things on your advice. I am not sure about the failure to warn doctrine here. That's a bad thing to watch before you go to sleep.
Well, it's a thriller about a killer and the police's efforts to capture him. I would not recommend it as late night viewing.
All right, now I got to do a spoiler, so I want everyone to turn off their radios if they haven't seen The Little Things yet. All right, so I gave my fair warning. Is that fair warning so I can ask you a question?
Sure.
All right, that's fair warning. Did the guy who got the shovel in the head do it?
No. So the again, spoiler warnings for everybody. The language of the film makes it pretty clear it wasn't him. The killer that we see at the beginning, getting out of that car and chasing that young lady, does not have a limp.
Oh, you're right.
Which Jared Leto's character very kind of ostentatiously does. So I mean, the movie is all about. I mean, look, the movie is all about cops who kill people and get away with it, and how they get away with it, and how they hide each other's, misdeeds. The movie is about, the titular Little Things. I think is uttered at one point by Denzel Washington, right?
Yes, twice. He says it twice. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a movie. It's a movie that is about cops who are serial killers, more or less. But it is not set up in such a way. It's set up in a way to kind of mimic the serial killer movies of the early to mid 90s, right? Which
that's what. Okay, now I understand what you were saying. And Denzel Washington is terrific, and the suspected serial killer, whose name I can't remember, is terrific as well. I'm not so sure about the
Jared Leto.
Yeah, Jared Leto. Now, I want to talk to you about David Simon. I think Dwayne gave you the rundown that, like Seth Rogen, out of nowhere, I become the object of these Hollywood people. And he says, no, I'm not. I'm a Baltimore guy. These Hollywood people venom online because of some Trump-related thing. They're triggered. Look, he's a brilliant guy in The Wire. He hadn't had much success since then. What do you know about him?
Well, David Simon is famously a newspaper guy. He wrote a couple of very good books, Homicide, which is about a year he had kind of embedded into the Baltimore Homicide Division, and The Corner, which was essentially about a year he spent reporting on folks who lived in Baltimore's rougher neighborhoods, dealing drugs and stuff. And the kind of the synthesis of those two books is what is The Wire. It is a look at both the cops and the crooks and kind of how they interact with each other. He's had good stuff since then. I mean, the Treme was not a huge success. It was a little too was a little too inside baseball, I guess, on post Hurricane Katrina New Orleans. But The Deuce is very good, which was his look at the porn industry in New York City in the 1970s.
But that got him all mixed up in the Me Too stuff. Not him personally, but James Franco and the exploitation of women. And he avoided the cultural appropriation discussion regarding Baltimore because it occurred before that became a thing.
Well, I mean, I don't really know that it would apply to him on I don't know that cultural appropriation, it would be a weird argument to employ against him, considering he is from Baltimore.
Oh, no, not that part. The part is that the critical legal theory people that I know would say he exploited the misery of the Black American experience in Baltimore for pecuniary gain and did not return it. That's how it works.
Again, I would not personally subscribe to this theory, so I have no real interest in promulgating it. But sure.
So tell me, after The Deuce gets him mixed up in the porn industry and Me Too, not about himself but about James Franco, has he had any success since then?
No. I mean, The Deuce went off the air last season, I believe. So
he did another show. I was wondering if you could remember the other show offhand. I'll find it here shortly. It came out. It's called The Plot Against America.
Oh, The Plot Against America. Well, that was a critically acclaimed piece of work. I didn't watch it because I never really cared for the book on which it was based. So I'm not I wasn't that interested. But it was a relatively popular, relatively well received work. I think it got some Emmy nominations. It seemed to do okay.
So if you want to defend him, feel free to defend him. I actually am just trying to understand why he's triggered by Trump so much and resorts to sort of over-the-top invective of the both fifth grade assortment, your mother, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, David Simon has always been a bit, hair trigger to anger on Twitter. Twitter is, a place where people are rewarded for being angry and nasty to each other, and there's a certain sort of person who gets wrapped up in that sort of thing, and he I think sometimes confuses flowery language for devastating comebacks. But it's a weird, stressful time. Everybody's very angry all the time, and Trump has a very good way of making people a little bit nuts, everybody who stormed the Capitol at his death.
By the way, Sonny, this is my theory about the Lincoln Project. Now they've got a non-disclosure agreement issue about Jonathan Weaver, or John Weaver. Apparently they've got all these non-disclosure agreements about John Weaver. And I'm beginning to think the people who are obsessive Trump critics have a lot more in common with Trump than they know.
Maybe that is it. But Trump is a weirdly specifically destabilizing force in the country's history. I mean, I can't think of any other president who could have, whipped his followers into a fervor to go and actually literally commit violence and smash into the Capitol and chase after members of Congress and senators and try to get them to, reverse the Electoral College vote. I mean, he is a uniquely terrible person who is uniquely ill-suited to the presidency. And if he drives people a little bit crazy on Twitter, it's no different than the fact that he's driving people crazy in real life.
Well, he is clearly the most provocative president of modern times. I would go back and point you to John Brown and to Andrew Jackson's followers and other incendiary figures who drove Southern slave owners to assault other members of Congress. I mean, there's violence in America. We got Bernie Sanders followers trying to shoot up every member of Congress on a softball field, for goodness sake. It's a crazy time.
Sure. You had a lone nut trying to shoot up the Republican softball team. I mean, I lived in D.C. when that happened. It was pretty scary.
Yeah, it was a mile from my house.
But there's a difference between, a lone nut who has been, a John Hinckley sort, right? We wouldn't blame Reagan for John Hinckley, or we wouldn't blame Martin Scorsese for John Hinckley trying to kill Reagan, right? Like, and there's a difference between a lone nut, being inspired to violence by, somebody they see on TV, and a figure who calls his leaders to, or a leader who calls his people to the city of Washington and has them storm the Capitol.
Well, no, wait. 800 of whom storm. 800. He does not call on them to storm the Capitol, but
we sent them to the Capitol. He said, "Show them. We're gonna show
Sonny,
them."
okay. Well, I wasn't going to litigate this with you. I wanted to go back to David Simon, but there are 15,000 people, 800 of whom enter the Capitol, many of whom need to go to jail for 20 years under the Sedition Act. And you'll get no argument from me. It was harrowing to see my friend Mitt Romney almost turn the wrong way into their grips. And Trump's culpability will be, I believe, actually tested as a criminal matter post-impeachment, when which he will be acquitted. But his impact on people are of a certain type, especially in Hollywood. And so my question is this performance art by Hollywood for Hollywood? In other words, do you have to hate Trump to advance in Hollywood now? And not only hate him, but hate everyone who understands him to have done good things like appoint 3 people to the Supreme Court?
I would say it's easier to advance in Hollywood if you hate Donald Trump. Certainly, there's not a whole lot to be gained by being a vocal Trump supporter in Hollywood. Certainly, and I do think that there is a kind of showiness to some of the Trump hatred that is undeniable. But again, Donald Trump has made himself a uniquely hateable figure.
Well, now that's where I wanted to go back to W. Was there the same thing concerning W? In other words, are we overlooking the fact that beginning probably with W, because it wasn't this way with the first Bush, Hollywood has gone so far to the left that they actually cannot. I paid Matt Continetti the ultimate compliment yesterday of being able to restate fairly his opposition's arguments and to understand them. Has Hollywood's left lost that ability?
You mentioned George W. Bush because he was also definitely hated and frequently called a war criminal and stuff.
Right.
But at the same time, Oliver Stone, who is a person who hates the right as much as any filmmaker or figure in Hollywood's recent or not so recent history, made a very fair movie about George W. Bush. Fair-ish. It was at least sympathetic to George W. Bush as a man, as a believer, man of faith, that sort of stuff. I do think that Donald Trump is kind of uniquely hated and uniquely pernicious. I mean, the whole fight over SAG, that went down last week, between Trump and SAG is kind of telling insofar as it's a little bit silly that SAG was even talking about kicking him out. And then Trump, throws a big baby fit and he's like, you can't fire me, I quit. And that's like a perfect, synecdoche for this whole.
But what I'm asking, Sonny, and I'm going to blow through my break here because I want to get your answer to this and I'll give you the last minute. Do you expect the next Republican president to be treated as badly or even worse in a continuation of the trend from W to Trump? Or do you believe Trump was uniquely bad because of Twitter and his behavior and that it will revert to the norm of George H.W. Bush when it comes to Hollywood and its politicization?
Well, I mean, I would say I would hope that it reverts to something closer to, HW or W in that it would be nice to have a little bit more normalcy. But I do think we live in kind of rapidly accelerating political polarization that is not good for anyone or the mental health of anyone. I mean, look, I don't know what will happen if we ever elect another Republican. I'm sure we will at some point here. The damage of Donald Trump won't be permanent. forever. But I don't know what Hollywood will do.
First of all, I think we're going to elect a Republican in 2024, and I think the good stuff that Donald Trump did will make that possible, but we will see. Sonny, I didn't get any recommendations. We'll do it next week. Follow Sonny Bunch on Twitter and go to left, right, and center aisle to see his podcast. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler's a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler. They are even alleging that possibly Parler was bribing Trump because they wanted to give him a part of the company while he was president, or after he was president, they were having the conversation. However, new information now shows that Facebook, not Parler, played the largest role in the Capitol Hill riot. New data from the American Department of Justice shows that despite the media and big tech campaign against Parler, it was Facebook which served as the top rallying point for those storming the Capitol building on January the 6th, Forbes reports. This is The Post-Millennial by Noah David Alter Toronto.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
They are claiming that what happened was an insurrection. It's a gigantic lie. Okay? All right. First, I guess, unarmed insurrection, where people take selfies at the desks of people they oppose politically.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. So this concludes the first part of my David Simon project. My question, uniquely troubled, typical Hollywood of the Trump era, and yeah, I know he lives in Baltimore, blah, 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 but he's part of the business. You know, when you go look up, he's meeting reporters in various places, talking about various films and doing the whole Hollywood thing. He's just Hollywood. Is he attention-seeking? Is he on a bad run when it comes to his projects? Is it he just hit 60? I'm not interested in rumors. I'm not trying to dox him. We never do that. You know me. I'm just genuinely curious. What makes someone this crazy on Twitter about someone he doesn't know, has never met, and was misrepresented in the original tweet that triggered it. Why do people live on Twitter to do other than talk about the Browns and the Indians? I don't know. I mean, I got to do show promotion and that, but just generally, you tell me. Go to HughHewitt.com. There's an email button. Find it. I don't want rumors. I'm not doxing him. I don't want, well, you know what I don't want. I just want to know from his former colleagues at the newspaper or those who worked with him what he's like. And if he's a saint, tell me he's a saint. He says he dug into Marine Recon. There are a lot of journalists who spend a month embedded, and then they're not Tom Ricks. Let me put it to you that way. They're not the people that I've featured for years on this program who actually report from. They're not John Fisher Burns. He's not John Fisher Burns. Just let me know. Let me now do the market report brought to you by Birch Gold. Yesterday, the Dow was down 7 points. The NASDAQ was up 53. Now, that's just weird. The NASDAQ is moving in a different direction from the Dow, and the S&P was up 6. Gold settled down a little bit at 18.18. You want to buy gold this weekend, you go to HughGold.com. Text my name, Hugh, to 474747. I believe in diversification. I believe in putting some gold in your safety deposit box. Not too much. I'm a 10% guy max for me. Some of you are gold bugs. I don't believe in that. You know that. Diversification. But if you're going to do something with gold, buy it from Birch Gold or get their information kit on how you roll over a portion of your IRA or 401k into a Birch Gold, super attended, and very securely stored physical gold, not an ETF. No, the real deal. Maple Leafs, American Eagles, Kruger, or buy it from Birch Gold. That's who I buy gold from. And you can text Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 4747. That's 474747, or go to HughGold.com. Let me also remind you, I did not forget, the weekend is upon us. ReliefFactor.com means a great sponsor of the show, like Birch Gold. I did not forget. I was just making the segment with Sonny go a little bit longer. I carry Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. In this era of COVID, you got to keep your weight down because obesity is a marker, and you want to lose some weight. And you want to keep your body in great shape, and the minor aches and pains from extra exercise comes with it. Maybe we should send some to David. Maybe he needs to get out more, take a walk. I don't know. Maybe he's in great shape. But you need to take this. $19.95 gets you started. Go for your weekend warrior stuff. It is upon you. Get out there. Make the best of it. All right? And the best way to do that is with ReliefFactor.com. And as I've been saying all week, it's my theme of the week. Put a bag in your car in the event you forgot it as you went about your daily work. Now, I do want to tell you about the impeachment trial. It was the same as it was the day before. The defense comes up today. It will be boring, too, as the first defense was. They're not very good lawyers, in my opinion. And the president's going to be acquitted. I did my reporting last night. It is going to be an acquittal because it's an unconstitutional proceeding, because you cannot have impeachment conviction trials post-tenure. The framers were aware of that option. It was in the Pennsylvania state constitution at that time. Article 2, Section 4 is very explicit. It applies to presidents, vice presidents, and officials. Yes, you can escape prosecution by resigning. That doesn't, you can escape impeachment trial by resigning, but you can't escape prosecution by resigning. It's a means to get you out of office, and if you refuse to get out of office, they can add in the bar on future seeking of office, but you can't go back. Can't go back and prosecute your favorite people in the Senate, nor do we want that precedent. And if I were the president's lawyers, and I am not now, not ever, haven't been asked, I would nevertheless make my defense about 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an unconstitutional proceeding, as 43 of you, Ted Cruz held open the possibility it was constitutional, called it a close question on this program, but voted not to proceed anyway. 44 of you have agreed that you shouldn't have proceeded through what we just saw for the reason that it was destructive of the country and unconstitutional. And we agree. We rest our case and ask you to acquit our client immediately so that the country can get back to real business. That's what I would do if I were them. They won't. They're not very good at this. But I do want to recommend one more thing to you. If you haven't watched The Wire, watch The Wire. I'll be back, hour 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show, straight ahead.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
They are claiming that what happened was an insurrection. It's a gigantic lie. Okay? All right. First, I guess, unarmed insurrection where people take selfies at the desks of people they oppose politically. It's the selfie insurrection. All right, so that's the first lie. It's based on that. If it wasn't an insurrection, then there's nothing to really talk about. The second is that the president incited the insurrection, even though they can produce, the only thing they could produce is, he says, you got to fight for what you believe. As everybody knows, that incites riots. The Democrats never say fight for what we stand for. And it just continues along those lines. Third, they equate believing that the election was illegitimate with treason and being an insurrectionist and so on. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what my side believes or your side believes. I care the way people act. How many Democrats believe that the election was not stolen from Hillary Clinton? The whole point of the Russian collusion lie was to prove that it was an illegitimate election. Putin won. Remember? Putin, not Trump.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I watch CNN so you don't have to. And here's an exchange between Poppy Harlow, who's one of their hosts, and Douglas Brinkley, who is a left-wing historian. Listen to this when they explain why the trial is necessary, even though everybody knows what the outcome is going to be.
Explain what you mean when you say that, the importance of this, even if there is another acquittal, is creating a historical record for the future.
It's absolutely everything. I've been reminding people at the end of World War II in 1945, when Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, went to the death camps, the Holocaust camps of Europe, the dead. And
okay. He says, I've been reminding people that Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander at the end of the Second World War, went to the death camps. And now when you hear a historian start out by talking about Nazis and death camps, you know it's not going to end well.
Immediately, the first thing he did was write a letter to General George Marshall that said, don't document everything. We need film footage. We need photographs. I want everything covered because people will claim it's a hoax and a conspiracy.
You hear this? The reason we need to have the trial, says this historian, is because at the end of the Second World War, Dwight Eisenhower visited death camps and says, my goodness, we need to take pictures of this. We need to get footage because someday somebody's going to say, this never happened. And so what happened at the Capitol building on January 6th is similar to the Holocaust in the sense that some people later on are going to deny that it ever happened. Therefore, we have to have a trial. What?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
But if you have Republicans who themselves are unwilling to push back, I mean, let's call them what they are. They're cowards.
And the magic word there is primary. Let Representative Glatsky know that if he doesn't stand up for internet freedom, that you will find a candidate to run against him who will. Inter-party competition. Now, some have spoken of the need for a new political party because they're so disgusted by the inside the Beltway country club Republican sellouts. That would be a tragic mistake. I just wrote a piece for The Spectator explaining why we don't need a new party. There are a number of legal barriers to a new party because the laws regarding ballot access were written by Republicans and Democrats working together. Your candidate will never get into the presidential debates as sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is not a commission. It's not appointed by the president, and it's most certainly not about debate. If so, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party candidates should have been in the last debate. They were on the ballot in enough states to theoretically get 270 electoral votes. Yet another obstacle to a new party. The other problem you have is that the lamest Republican in America, the lamest Republican nominee begins with 35% of the vote. The lamest Democrat nominee in America begins with somewhere between 38 and 40% of the vote. And then you build from there. Running in a new party, you start at 0.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Heechen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Heechen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
If you're an attorney, is there a job? Is there a job more important than this one? I mean, is it more prestigious than to defend any president in a Senate impeachment trial? Bruce Castor, again, video cut 1, play cut.
House managers who spoke earlier were brilliant speakers. And I made some notes, and they'll hear about what I think about some of the things they said later when I'm closing the case. But I thought they were brilliant speakers, and I loved listening to them. And they're smart fellows.
Okay, I'm going to get preachy now. Don't ever, if you are in a setting, whether it's a high school debate club or the most important trial of the century, the second impeachment of a president who happens to have left office, don't sing the praises of the other team. How you love listening to them and how great they were. Unless, can you guess? Unless you're better than them. If you're going to crush them with your rhetoric, with your argument, with your
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. The long weekend beckons. But first, David Cortman of Alliance Defending Freedom rejoins me. Alliance Defends is its is its Twitter handle, but I want you to go to adflegal.org/Hugh. All right, because now is the time to stand up. We are entering into a perilous era for religious liberty and rights of conscience, and I need you to sign up with the Alliance Defending, the best legal defense team in America for religious liberty and the rights of conscience. Is at adflegal.org/Hugh for more information. You can also call 866-359-9644. I'll give you all that at the end of this. David, good morning. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, I'm troubled. I'm troubled, and I'm also encouraged. This is going to be a very demanding 4 years based upon just the actions of 2 weeks. What'd you make of the first 2 weeks of Team Biden with regards to rights of conscience and religious liberty, David?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of signals there that there's going to be many conflicts between the LGBT agenda and religious freedom, religious rights, on abortion rights, on freedom of churches to live out their faith, social services, all kinds of issues are going to be popping up pretty quickly.
Now, I want to go to the Philadelphia Diocese case because I view it as the most important on the docket. However, the LA church case also mattered a lot. So would you do the latter first, then we'll come to the former?
Yeah, I mean, the church cases, and actually they bleed into each other. They relate to each other. We'll talk about that in a second. But the LA church case, ADF has been fighting, almost 20 cases over the country about, what are the free exercise rights for churches during COVID. And what we've seen time after time, we've had a case in Nevada where the governor will say, well, we're going to allow thousands of people to go to casinos, but we won't allow 50 people to go to churches. The new case by the Supreme Court said, no, you can't have that differential treatment. That violates the free exercise clause. Go back and fix it. Really important ruling.
No, it was rather summary. For those who do not follow closely Supreme Court orders or do not follow SCOTUS blog, and David is all over this. How long have you been practicing before the Supreme Court, David?
It's over 25 years now, I think.
And how many times have you been first or second chair at a Supreme Court argument?
Probably about 10, somewhere around there.
All right, so let's break this down for people. What they did was unusual in the California case because they acted rather spontaneously. Were you surprised by that?
No, because this issue keeps happening. And as you know, there was a case out of New York about a month ago where the Supreme Court did the same thing. There are these emergency motions to say, look, they're violating our rights now for months through COVID. We need a quick ruling because, as you know, it takes a long time to get to the Supreme Court. And the court issued a ruling, but then states like California were not following it. They said, well, we don't care what the Supreme Court said. We're still going to violate the church's rights. So they revisited again and said, look, we said what we meant the first time. You can't treat churches worse than you treat, bars, restaurants, Hollywood, what have you.
This has become a black letter law moment, and I want people to know that they should contact ADF if they see discriminate. Before I butcher the rule, I have my own formulation of the rule. When do you think people ought to be alarmed, David, about the treatment by the local or state government of houses of worship of any denomination or no denomination at all?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have places like California completely shutting them down. No matter how large your church, synagogue, whatever it happens to be is, you can have 0 people. That should be very alarming. Or when you say, look, you can go to a restaurant and have it 50% full, you can go to a bar, you can go to a casino, but churches can only have 10, 25, 50 people. Any type of treatment like that, that should definitely set off the red flags.
And the person you should go to, write to me or go to adflegal.org/Hugh. You can find your way around the website, or you can call 866-359-9644. That's adflegal.org/Hugh. Now we come to the big case, which is Diocese of Philadelphia, initiated under my good friend, who I know is listening right now, Archbishop Chaput, now retired in Philadelphia. But it was, I think it could be seminal. I think we could get rid of Smith here. But you tell me, David, what is the case about and what you think is going to happen? And if you have any role in it, can you expand on that?
Yeah, really, really important case brought by Catholic Social Services, as you mentioned, and some individual foster parents. In fact, one of the plaintiffs fostered over 40 children just by herself in the last 25 years. So really important case. And the question is, can religious social service agencies, which have been around longer than states being involved in these type of issues, The church has reached out for adoption and foster care for decades, 50, 60, 70 years, some of them. And the city comes in and gets involved and says, well, you know what? We're no longer going to allow you to place children in homes that you believe to be in the best interest of the child, homes with a man and a woman, homes that are in accordance with your religious beliefs. We're going to say you have to violate your religious beliefs in order to participate in the placement of children. And the tragedy overall of that is that means less children are going to be placed, so it actually harms the kids just because of this new agenda that the left is putting forth.
And what did the Third Circuit rule about that?
Yeah, and the Third Circuit in a terrible ruling basically said, well, it's okay because they have this rule, back to the Smith case you're talking about, they have this rule that says everybody has to do the same thing. The problem is that falls especially hard on religious organizations who are abiding by their faith beliefs. And what's interesting here is social study after social study for decades now have said that kids do best in a home with a mom and a dad. That's period. That's social science. But for some reason, this new agenda says, no, we want you to change that. We want you to violate your beliefs. And what's going to happen with the Smith case that you mentioned that has this low bar under free exercise to say, well, if you make everybody do it, it's okay, even if it violates the church's religious beliefs.
Now, employment division versus Smith, which I've been teaching for 25 years. It's a Justice Scalia authored opinion. And I've argued for years it has to go. And I've posited for years it grew out of the mistaken belief by Justice Scalia that no matter what happened in America's amazing mosaic of faith traditions, the Roman Catholic Church was too strong to be assailed by it. And I believe that it's not explicit in his opinion, it's just who he is. And he was wrong. The Roman Catholic Church has become a particular target of the state. Now, that is argued. Is that before the case in Philadelphia Archdiocese?
It is, and extremely important. I agree with you. I think it was, oddly enough, one of Justice Scalia's more pragmatic opinions. He's very principled. What does the Constitution say? What does it mean? That, to me, was more a practical opinion. Say, well, gee, we don't want everybody to become a law unto themselves. The problem, though, is when you do that, and a great example is back to the COVID cases. This is what I was saying where they relate. Talking about worship. In California, singing and worship was completely banned. And they said, well, you're stopping everybody from singing, so the rule is fine. Well, that's the Smith scenario. But the way it should be looked at is that if you're singing in a bar or singing at a concert, that's not the same thing as singing for worship. And so that's the case where you say, look, even if this does fall evenly upon everybody else, the free exercise clause has special protections. And if you're singing for worship, that's its own category. We shouldn't just say, well, they're stopping people from singing in a bar so they can stop you from singing at church. And so the fact that they entertained that in the LA case worries me a little bit about whether they're going to reach it in Fulton or not, because it's a spillover.
Well, I think they want a full briefing of it. I'm actually following this so closely that I expect Sherbet to be 6'3", and Smith to be 6'3". I expect them to go back to the Sherbet standard, and I believe the Chief Justice will write a concurrence similar to that which he wrote in Citizens United, explaining why stare decisis does not apply to Smith. My question to you is, do you think we have at least 5 votes on the court now? And if not, who of the other 5 besides the Chief Justice do you worry about?
Yeah, I think we do. I hope we do. I just hope they reach it. One thing about Chief Justice Roberts, he's an incrementalist. Hopefully he understands the harm, and that's what Smith has brought. It has brought harm on religious folks, especially these days when it's no longer in vogue. Like you were saying, maybe, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, religious folks had a seat at the table. Now the left doesn't even want them at the table at all. So it really has brought harm. But when you have, interestingly, this in Smith, the folks who dissented were the more liberal justices. So that's flipped. So you would hope that the liberal justices having the principle saying, look, we want to protect religious freedom for all, large religions, small religions, minority religions, like you see filing briefs in the case. This is best for everybody. And my last point is, it's best for folks who don't even practice a religion, because if you don't have true free exercise of religion, which allows you to believe what you want and not believe, it actually covers everyone, whether you're a person of faith or not. So free exercise is a preeminent freedom that helps everyone.
David, I spent last Thursday, a week ago yesterday, on Skid Row at the Judge Carter hearing, and it's clear we need faith-based organizations involved in this homeless crisis. What's your timetable for this?
Yeah, it's extremely important. Hopefully, pretty soon, it was argued in November. But I think now's the time to hit this ruling because now's the time it's most important, as you mentioned, because our freedoms are certainly at risk.
And now is the time to stand with ADF. Go to adflegal.org/Hugh. That's adflegal.org/Hugh or call 866-359-9644. For a time such as this, we need your help. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
We already know that tech companies were interfering in the 2020 election significantly. Little did we know there was both private and public pressure to have the tech companies act as political referees to the benefit of Joe Biden and the Democrats. The most interfered with election in American history. Let me say that again. It was the most interfered with election in American history. From the private interests to the tech interests to the changing of how we do voting in this country, it was as if it was the first election in American history, because every election before it was done in completely different ways. But these tech companies have incredible influence over Congress. They give millions of dollars through lobbying and direct contributions to be able to dictate the legislative agenda and the regulatory agenda. Remember, President Donald Trump, as one of the last things he did as president, tried to get Section 230 removed as part of the National Defense Bill. Congress wanted nothing to do with it. Would have been a great time to hold these tech companies accountable. In a bizarre and stunning turn of events, if Congress would have repealed Section 230, Facebook could have been sued for not monitoring the violence that these rioters were planning on Facebook. Same with Parler. They're both protected by Section 230. So Congress is now using this as an opportunity to do the tech companies' bidding to suffocate Parler.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Another no news week. I struggled to find something to write about, but I did. I found it. In the strangest unintended of all consequences yet, folks are taking notice when new precedents are set. Take it from a person who well knows of what he speaks. This is what I've been through in just the past 2 weeks. A girl who I last dated in 1982 wrote me a long letter just to tell me we were through. My coach in high school basketball, did that guy have a gut? He called me on the telly and he told me I was cut. And though I haven't worked for them since back in 2010, I got a note from Disney that they laid me off again. I haven't played a hockey game in these many years, but they pulled me for a ringer and I've been reduced to tears. But if you think I'm down, that's not a place I'm going to stay at. If this is all a game, then it's one that two can play at. I'm canceling my membership at Blockbuster. I am. And when I finally fly again, it won't be on Pan Am. I'm giving up my Plymouth, but I think I'll stick to rhyming. If you want to be successful, what's important is the
timing.
Ipso facto, ex post facto by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that is a wonderful poem. I don't know how you had time to write that. It's Valentine's week.
I had a very busy Valentine's week, and I think I exploded violins for hundreds of romantic people across the country. Well, not hundreds, but enough that...
Well, if anybody, forgot to do that, and they still want one, if they write TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com and they offer you a Bitcoin...
Oh, a Bitcoin will do it, yes.
Okay. I just going to say everybody's got a price, right?
Thank you, my agent. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying if Jeff Bezos needs a poem, he could call.
He sure does. I mean, certainly, absolutely.
And ipso pass. What was the name of this poem this week?
Ipso facto, ex post facto.
Will that be posted at TarzanaJoe.com?
Of course.
Race ipsa.
I won't look into it.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye.
All right, now I've got to tell you, coming up after the break, I'm going to talk with Maria Salazar, the new freshman congresswoman from Florida's 27th district, and then Senator Marco Rubio, a juror in the impeachment trial. So lots ahead. I've got to make sure you know about the major story of the day that will not get much attention. Cuomo aide admits they hid nursing home data so feds wouldn't find out. Front page, New York Post. It's in my Twitter feed. It reads, Governor Cuomo's top aide privately apologized to Democratic lawmakers for withholding the state's nursing home death toll from COVID-19, telling them, quote, we froze, close quote, out of fear that the true numbers would, quote, be used against us, close quote, by federal prosecutors, the New York Post has learned. The stunning admission of a cover-up was made by Secretary to the Governor Melissa DeRosa during a video conference call with state Democratic leaders in which she said the Cuomo administration had rebuffed the legislative request for the tally in August because, quote, right around the same time, then President Donald Trump turns this into a giant political football, according to an audio recording of the 2-hour-plus meeting. Quote, he starts tweeting that we're killing everyone in nursing homes, DeRosa said. He starts going after Murphy, starts going after Newsom, starts going after Gretchen Whitmer. She continues quoting, in addition to attacking to Cuomo's fellow Democratic governors, Trump said, quote, directs the Department of Justice to do an investigation into us all. And basically we froze because we were in a position where we weren't sure if we were going to give the Department of Justice or what we were going to give you guys. What we started saying was going to be used against us while we weren't sure if there was going to be an investigation. This played a very large role into that. That, my friends, is an admission of a cover-up. She lied to the state Senate. It appears that they lied to the Department of Justice. It is a major story. Now, I don't know how much attention it will get because of the impeachment trial, which will carry on to its inevitable course of acquittal. But acquittal doesn't come to next week. And they didn't do a true Friday news dump. They dumped it on a Thursday, so it should be dominating today. But again, it's uphill against the impeachment trial. I urge you to keep retweeting it and focusing people on the fact they lied because they were afraid. I mean, it's just like everything else of campaign 2020. Media cooperated with Biden to get him elected because they hate Trump. And I understand that. I get that. But you can't allow governors to lie to the Department of Justice ever What will Team Biden do at the DOJ? What will Merrick Garland do? That might come up at the confirmation hearing. We'll find out. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
They equate believing that the election was illegitimate with treason and being an insurrectionist and so on. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what my side believes or your side believes. I care the way people act. How many Democrats believe that the election was not stolen from Hillary Clinton? The whole point of the Russian collusion lie was to prove that it was an illegitimate election. Putin won. Remember? Putin, not Trump. Telling all Americans over and over and over police are racist does not lead to fatal riots, the burning down of businesses and police cars. That does not lead to that. But this is a cover-up for the violence of the left. That's the way it should be regarded. I wish we had the male-female hour today. I apologize to you. I apologize to me. I apologize to males and females listening. I cannot control the events outside. I can only control how I react. And this is a time of crisis wherein my normal programming is deferred.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
So you're Donald Trump, and it appears you lost the election. But you're hanging by a thread. There's a shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a speech, an incendiary speech. I'm going to make a whole bunch of my supporters go insane, go berserk. I'll send them to the Capitol building. They'll trash the place. The Democrats will go, oh, my goodness, I guess Donald Trump is really, really serious about believing the election was stolen. Maybe we should take a look at this. We take another look at it. The evidence is overwhelming. The election was stolen. Let's have him stay there 4 more years. Really? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll send a whole bunch of my supporters. I'll trash the place, put a lot of negative footage up there, and Americans are going to go, you know what? If this man doesn't get 4 more years, he'll burn the whole country down, so let's keep him there. Really? You think that looked good for him? You think that advanced his agenda? Think having that little idiot with the Viking hat help Donald Trump 4 more years down the road? And the story came out, says the guy's sorry. Said I should have been better dressed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about this. It was very serious and very scary. And people died and people got injured. And Donald Trump wanted that? He was hoping it would happen? Really? That's how much you hate this guy?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I want to talk to you about where we are in the culture and in the nation right now. So talk to us. What are you thinking?
As you know, I reaffirmed my faith in Jesus Christ when I was going through this crucible of being tortured in a politically motivated prosecution by Robert Mueller. Now, I know you missed this, Eric, along with everybody else in the country, but at midnight on Election Day, the busiest news day of the year, the Department of Justice released the last unredacted sections of the Mueller report regarding Roger J. Stone.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt standing by for Congresswoman Maria Salazar. I've just got to tell you that the Chamber of Commerce has done it again. In Politico this morning, of all places, of course, the Politico's gone left, as the Chamber has. And the headline is, "The Chamber embraces Biden and Republicans are livid." Now, I have been talking about this already, that the Chamber of Commerce in D.C. has gone hard left. And Jason Smith, who publicly bashed the Chamber's endorsement of Neera Tanden. Now, I'm not saying anything about Neera. She's a colleague, and I'd never, no matter where colleagues are, I never say good, bad, indifferent things about them. Colleagues get colleague courtesy from me. So, but I will tell you that because of the Chamber's endorsement of Neera's nomination to become head of OMB, Jason Smith has said the Chamber has forgotten Main Street America. Do they really care about the bottom line of companies and small businesses and growth, or do they care more about social justice? Look, that was answered long ago. The Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. has abandoned small business. And every local chamber and every state chamber should immediately cut ties with the National Chamber of Commerce. Tom Donahue, who led its building into a powerhouse on behalf of small businesses and free enterprise, brought along from the American Trucking Company his protege. And she left and came back, and when she came back, she's just full-on Beltway, and the Chamber of Commerce has gone hard left and no longer represents business, and business should absolutely no longer support it. I'm joined now by Representative Maria Salazar from Florida. Good morning, Representative, and welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Brian,
I know it's early, but I'm in California. It's 4:30 out here. When I'm on the West Coast and I do this show, I take no excuses. Good morning to you, Congresswoman. You are one of the bright stars of the new freshman class. And I'm not on in Miami. I'm on all over Florida, but not in Miami. So would you please introduce yourself to 400 Hugh Hewitt affiliates and tell them about your story?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we got to do something about that, the fact that you are not in Miami. So I'm going to help you with that, all right?
Thank you. Thank you.
I am a Cuban-American. My parents, I'm first-generation American. My parents came when they were 25 with $5 in their pocket because Fidel Castro, somebody that I'm sure you would recognize that name, promised them democratic socialism. And they had to flee because in practice it was miserable, in theory was glorious. So the reason why I'm running, and I ran and I won in my district, is because we know very well what dogma and ideology does, what it promises, but at the end what it comes out to be. And that is why in Miami, we Cuban Americans and the Venezuelans and the whole Latin American community understands that what's happening right now within the Democratic Party is something very dangerous for the Republic.
Now, Maria, you are an existential threat to Democrats everywhere. You've got not only brains and a master of public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School, you've also got media chops. You were a superstar in media before you decided to do this. Why make a jump from a fast-track career to being a freshman in Congress? Because it's just most people don't do that.
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm going to explain to you why. When I was a little girl in Little Havana, I would hear my parents saying that in Cuba, people got into politics when they couldn't do anything else. And then the people that wound up being politicians were a bunch of thieves. And look what happened. A thief stole their fatherland. So I decided that for this beautiful American experiment, the American exceptionality, you need to have people that can go forward with a lot of talent and with a career like journalism and explain to the rest of the republic and the country that we need to preserve the American agenda because this is the only agenda that works. And how do we know? Because we have seen the opposite. We know what the banana republic agenda represents for your children and my children. So I think that honorable people have to step forth and do it, and I decided to do it myself.
Now, Congresswoman,
what I was preaching.
I've been doing this for 30 years on radio and television, and I happen to respect people who can do interviews, and you can do interviews. And you have sat down with Maduro, with Augusto Pinochet. You've sat down with Castro. So you know how to do the one-on-one. You're the first Spanish language journalist in the Congress who has actually joined. What did you learn, going toe-to-toe with the dictator? Now, one is a authoritarian, the other is a totalitarian. What did you learn?
Correct. Well, I'm going to tell you what I learned. I think this is a very good question. I can tell you that indeed, I was the only member of the Spanish television world in the United States that was able to sit down with Fidel because he knew that there was a very big difference in sitting down with Barbara Walters or with Diane Sawyer, whom he can deceive or enamor, or sit down with us, that we really knew who he was and what he had done to his people. So I'm delighted and honored that I was able to get that interview because it took me 3 years to chase him until I got him. And I'm down telling you that he was the devil. You can definitely, and I can tell you and attest with no qualms that Fidel Castro is Satan, and you feel it.
Christopher Hitchens, when he was alive, used to do a weekly spot with me. And he told me the most evil man he had ever met was the dictator of Argentina, that he could feel it, as you're discussing. He could actually sense that this man was evil personified. So you got that from Maria? From Fidel?
Yeah, Fidel, yeah. You feel it it's something that you cannot describe with words because it's a feeling that stays on your skin. But whatever you want to call it, it's the aura, it's the vibes, the chemistry, the vibrations, whatever you want to call it, but you do feel it on your skin that you are in front of a very dark presence. And then the energy grows and it oppresses you the more time you spend in front of him, the longer you are in front of that presence, the more you feel it and the more it oppresses. And that has stuck in my conscience. I did that in 1995, and I was in front of him for 35 hours. For 3 hours, and yeah. So
you never forget a great. I interviewed the Dalai Lama in '95 as well. I just thought of a '95. I'll never forget 3 hours with the Dalai Lama in Atlanta. You just don't forget that sort of thing. But at least I was with a very good man. You were with Satan. Now, Congresswoman, this is a difficult question. If anyone else has your chops and your experience, really, Christiane Amanpour made a career out of sitting down with Khomeini. You did not get that break from big media in New York, despite your record-breaking interviews. Is that because you were a conservative and a Cuban American?
Absolutely. I never got the big break because of two things. Because I was a conservative I was a Cuban American. And the problem with the Cuban Americans is that we are the only ethnic group that you can make fun of and pay no consequences. I'm going to repeat that to you again. The Cuban Americans in the United States could be made fun of, mocked, but no one will ever pay a price, whether you are academia, whether you're the intelligentsia, whether you're in the news media. It doesn't matter. We can be very much made fun, create a caricature of us. Why? Because we sided with the United States in the very big fight with the big Satan that was loved and adored for 60 years by the rest of the world. That's
I've never heard that before. I've often cited to my friends on the left Armando Valladares' Against All Hope as the Bible they've got to read to have even a glimpse. If they're an Anglo like me and they're Irish Catholic, they need to read that book. But I have never heard what you just said. I didn't realize that is something you believe. I've heard it said that anti-Catholicism is the last acceptable prejudice, which I believe. I'm a Catholic. But you just said with great passion and conviction that this goes on all the time about Cuban Americans, and that's news to me, Congresswoman Salazar.
Well, but think about it. Think about it. They can deride us. They can make fun of us. They can do anything to us. Anyone, the academia, even the news organizations, and there is no price to pay. Why? If you were to do that to any other ethnic group in the United States, you would have to, I apologize, it's true, I'm so sorry, we made a mistake. It never happens with the Cuban Americans because the Cuban Americans are caricatured, that we're the bad people, that we were the people that sided with the dictator, because we sided with the Yankees, we sided with the good forces.
Well, now, Congresswoman, I've got 1 minute left. You got to come back. You're terrific. But I got to ask you, you've got a lot of Venezuelan exiles. You've got a lot of people from Puerto Rico who fled. Florida is now full of people who have had to go there for opportunity. You got a great governor. You got a great delegation. I should disclose my son works for Michael Waltz, so I know all about your delegation.
Yeah.
Yes. Florida is
wonderful. Waltz is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, Florida is the new Texas. Everybody's going to Florida. What's your goal? I mean, give us a minute of what you want to accomplish.
I just want to create a better future for my kids and the kids of everybody that's watching. I need to preserve, and I'm going to do everything possible in order to preserve the system, the American exceptionality. That it's in danger right now. And why is it in danger? Because there are people in media and academia that believe that democratic socialism is the way to go, that handouts is the way to go, that indebting the government to the max is the way to go. That is not free market, freedom, the Constitution. That is what I really wanted to do. And that's the only reason why I'm doing this, because you know why? Because we have seen the other side. We know, we have points of reference. And this is the land of the free. And the last city on the hill and the rest of the world is watching. If we don't keep it with the way it is intact, there's no way to go and no place to go for us.
Congresswoman, that's inspiring. You've made my Friday, you've made my long weekend, and I hope you keep making return trips to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Maria Salazar represents Florida's 27th district. Go follow her and find her on Twitter, and I promise you she'll be back. Thank you, Congresswoman. That was terrific. Wow. Good. Wow, there are days that, honestly, I'm not on in Miami. Miami's a very exclusive market, meaning that they have to often have unique personalities. And so there are some markets in America where you got to have a tie to the local market to be on. But I'm on Tampa, Sarasota, all through the Florida. But Orlando, Jacksonville. But Miami, wow. She's something. Hey, this show is brought to you by Rom in part. Great sponsor. I tell you about it every single hour of every single day, 15 times a week, for one reason. If you actually have pain that you can't resolve and you don't want to take painkillers, do take whatever your doctor gives you. I never tell people not to take what their doctor gives them. But you've tried over the counter, you want to try something new, try ReliefFactor.com. Tens of thousands of people take natural supplement every day. It's the only one I take. I take it every day. You should too. ReliefFactor.com. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, back-to-back, joins me next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I want to talk to you about where we are in the culture and in the nation right now. So talk to us. What are you thinking?
As you know, I reaffirmed my faith in Jesus Christ when I was going through this crucible of being tortured in a politically motivated prosecution by Robert Mueller. Now, I know you missed this, Eric, along with everybody else in the country, but at midnight on Election Day, the busiest news day of the year, the Department of Justice released the last unredacted sections of the Mueller report regarding Roger J. Stone Jr. And you know what they said? They never had any factual evidence whatsoever against me regarding the Russians, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, stolen emails, John Podesta, nothing. They had nothing. Now, who releases something at midnight? So in other words, the big media outlets, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the people who posted headlines blaring that I was a Russian agent, none of them cover this moment. It gets covered by The Guardian and it gets covered by BuzzFeed only because BuzzFeed brought the lawsuit which required the Justice Department to finally unredact this information. To take it to modern day terms, yes, I was in Washington. I spoke on January 5th. I actually never left my hotel room at all on January 6th. I wasn't on the ellipse. I didn't march to the Capitol. I wasn't at the Capitol. I was as horrified as every American to see acts of violence there.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Heachen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Heachen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at Public Policy.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue is back once a week. Our wonderful sponsor, Hillsdale College, brings us a conversation about something that endures. And we spend an hour, 4 segments, talking about a matter of consequence. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. All of the previous dialogues, all 8 years of them, are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Last week, we began part 1 on Ulysses S. Grant. And Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and Professor Adam Carrington led us through a fascinating hour. I got a lot of email about that. And so we begin immediately. Dr. Arnn, when we left off last week, I had not yet gotten deep into Ron Chernow's biography, but I have read Bruce Catton, as you have. I have read a lot of Civil War history. But it is in Chernow that I come to appreciate the massive effort that Grant marshaled, the number of armies that he generaled, the much more challenging job he had compared to Lee or any other general in actually American history to battle on our own continent It's an extraordinary accomplishment.
So I think like a teacher, and what the audience has just learned is Hugh has done more reading, and now he's got a different view.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Grant was, it's very difficult in a long political career to show quality all the way through it. That's very rare. And, because situations change and you're prepared for the last one and your character works in a certain way and all that stuff. I think Donald Trump had a bad 2 weeks or a month, maybe as much as that. But he did so much good, Well, anyway, Grant, there are problems in his career, but first to last, at the end, he was a heck of a guy. Right down to the time when he was dying, and Mark Twain was helping him write his really brilliant autobiography, which is worth reading.
We're going to get there. I want to conclude, Adam Carrington, though, 1864 to 1865, which is where I am in renewing my acquaintance with Grant. And he is the commander of armies as large as you can imagine in a time when logistics is difficult and communications imperfect. And he generals in a way that many favorably compare to Napoleon.
Yes, and we had never seen war on this scale, and we had never seen war that was as total as this, much less dealing with the fact of a civil war. And it's amazing when you see, I mentioned this last week, the germs of this, the beginning of this. Even when he's serving as a quartermaster in the Mexican War, he's learning not just the tactics. Lee, of course, was a brilliant tactician, but Grant was someone who could hold the whole in his head, not just as far as supplying an army and fighting with an army, but how to break up the South east to west. And I think you really see that shining forth when he is able to take over the armies entirely, despite how bloody and awful it was when he had to go head-to-head with Lee during that time that you're talking about.
Indeed. And Dr. Arnn, we've talked about Lincoln a lot. You are a Lincoln scholar. And it took Lincoln a while to find the right general. But once he found him, he stuck with him, despite the now documented drinking binges, which occurred not during combat, but when the pressure was off. He had this lifelong binge drinking issue. But Lincoln stuck with him. He didn't say the apocryphal, let's send more whiskey like that to other generals. But he often stood by the man. And a comment on Lincoln and Grant's relationship.
Well, I've been trained as a historian by the great Martin Gilbert, and you have to have documentary evidence for everything. But once in a while, a quote is so good that it just has to be true. and that's the one. He's drunk. He's drunk all the time. And Lincoln said, find out what he's drinking and give it to the rest of them.
Yeah. You know what Chernow says about that is that Lincoln later said, that is so good that we have to use it. So I'm paraphrasing, even though he didn't say it. He said, I want to appropriate it. So it's kind of his.
Yeah. Well, see, I believe, I don't know what Adam thinks. And Adam is, I'm a Lincoln scholar because I studied with a great Lincoln scholar, and you just have to learn it all. But Adam, has written on it and knows a lot about it and teaches it more than I do. But I will say, first of all, I think Lincoln was possessed of a great strategic vision. He understood. You can tell it early when he's trying to keep Kentucky in the Union and Maryland from getting away. He understood sort of how the war was going to break out. And so he was looking for somebody who would follow that view and, and embellish it. But also he was looking for somebody who would fight. And Lincoln did not confuse himself for a master tactician. And also he knew he wasn't there. And so when he was looking at generals, his frustration was he just couldn't get them to fight. And, they were, McClellan especially, who was an opponent in the 1864 election. McClellan was a fancy general and very skilled, and the troops loved him. And his army looked great, and he didn't fight much. And Lincoln was, unlike, apparently McClellan couldn't see the vast cost of this war every day, no matter how much fighting. And Lincoln could see that. And then Grant could see that.
When we come back, we will discuss with Professor Adam Carrington and President of Hillsdale College, Larry Arnn, what happened when Lincoln was assassinated, the relationship with Andrew Johnson, and the decision of Grant to seek the presidency. Then, how he governed as president, and then how he wrote the greatest memoir written by a president ever. I think that's common agreement. In the third hour of today, the Hillsdale Dialogue, the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I watch CNN so you don't have to. And here's an exchange between Poppy Harlow, who's one of their hosts, and Douglas Brinkley, who is a left-wing historian. Listen to this when they explain why the trial is necessary, even though everybody knows what the outcome is going to be.
Explain what you mean when you say that, you know, the importance of this, even if there is another acquittal, is creating a historical record for the future.
It's absolutely everything. I've been reminding people at the end of World War II in 1945, when Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, went to the death camps, the Holocaust camps of Europe, the dead. And
okay. He says, I've been reminding people that Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander at the end of the Second World War, went to the death camps. And now when you hear a historian start out by talking about Nazis and death camps, you know it's not going to end well.
Immediately, the first thing he did was write a letter to General George Marshall that said, don't document everything. We need film footage. We need photographs. I want everything covered because people will claim it's a hoax and a conspiracy.
You hear this? The reason we need to have the trial, says this historian, is because at the end of the Second World War, Dwight Eisenhower visited death camps and says, my goodness, we need to take pictures of this. We need to get footage because someday somebody's going to say, this never happened. And so what happened at the Capitol building on January 6th is similar to the Holocaust in the sense that some people later on are going to deny that it ever happened. Therefore, we have to have a trial. What?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
But if you have Republicans who themselves are unwilling to push back, I mean, let's call them what they are. They're cowards.
And the magic word there is primary. Let Representative Glatsky know that if he doesn't stand up for internet freedom, that you will find a candidate to run against him who will. Inter-party competition. Now, some have spoken of the need for a new political party because they're so disgusted by the inside the Beltway country club Republican sellouts. That would be a tragic mistake. I just wrote a piece for The Spectator explaining why we don't need a new party. There are a number of legal barriers to a new party because the laws regarding ballot access were written by Republicans and Democrats working together. Your candidate will never get into the presidential debates as sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is not a commission. It's not appointed by the president, and it's most certainly not about debate. If so, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party candidates should have been in the last debate. They were on the ballot in enough states to theoretically get 270 electoral votes. Yet another obstacle to a new party. The other problem you have is that the lamest Republican in America, the lamest Republican nominee begins with 35% of the vote. The lamest Democrat nominee in America begins with somewhere between 38 and 40% of the vote. And then you build from there. Running in a new party, you start at 0.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Heachin of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lan Hee Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
If you're an attorney, is there a job? Is there a job more important than this one? I mean, is it more prestigious than to defend any president in a Senate impeachment trial? Bruce Castor, again, video cut one, play cut.
House managers who spoke earlier were brilliant speakers. And I made some notes, and they'll hear about what I think about some of the things they said later when I'm closing the case. But I thought they were brilliant speakers, and I loved listening to them. And they're smart fellas.
Okay, I'm going to get preachy now. Don't ever, if you are in a setting, whether it's a high school debate club or the most important trial of the century, the second impeachment of a president who happens to have left office, don't sing the praises of the other team. How you love listening to them and how great they were. Unless, can you guess? Unless you're better than them. If you're going to crush them with your rhetoric, with your argument, with your evidence, with your style, with your tone, with your delivery, then you can do it. Then you can risk it. Even then, not advisable.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. The Hillsdale Dialogue got started early today because Senator Rubio needs the last segment of today's show, and therefore we began early with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. all things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu, including the application that you want to get done for next year, even though I think their application deadline is soon upon us. Am I right about that, Dr. Arnn?
Correctamundo, and applications are strong.
You'd better hurry up, because one of the few places where college still will be done well, if not the only place. I do love my Christian colleges out there. I do love my Chapman, but I'm telling you, Hillsdale is the lantern of the North. Go to chapman.edu and get a giddy up, and you'll actually have college. Or go to hughforhillsdale.com for all of our dialogues. We're also joined by Professor Adam Carrington, grant specialist, and we begin where we left off last hour. And I'll start with you, Professor Carrington. Lincoln is shot and killed. Grant is in the business of accepting the South's surrender. What happens to Grant at that moment, and how does he go from commander of the armies over a defeated Southern army to president in 3 years?
It's a whirlwind story with lots of politics and the sad aftermath of the Civil War. Grant starts out very generous in his surrender terms to Lee, which was typical of him and good-hearted of him. He said, "They are our countrymen again," at Appomattox. But immediately, or only a few days after that, Lincoln is shot, and this throws Reconstruction, what we do after the war, into turmoil. Andrew Johnson, we talked about last week, the vice president, was picked because he was a strong Union Democrat, but was not in line with Reconstruction, at least not a vigorous one that was going to protect the rights of freed African Americans in the South, that was going to protect the whites in the South that were sympathetic to the Union and to African Americans. And Grant is stuck trying his best as the military commander to actually enforce a lot of the protections in the South and trying to keep order in the South, and getting not much help at all from Johnson, who is very angry about that. He is warring with the radical Republicans in Congress. And by 1868, as much as Grant tried to make peace with both sides, the radical Republicans and and Johnson, he eventually has to choose sides, and he chooses to line more with the radical Republicans, although not entirely. And at that point, as the war hero that saved the Union, as someone who is at least considered not more on the side of the radical Republicans, but still a bit of a moderate ground, basically he is the nominee. If he wants it, he's the one real consensus candidate that could truly bring together the Republican Party, the North, and win. And he decides, I think largely out of duty, that given his singular place, given the destructive place the country is still in, that he needed to take the job and needed to run, and then goes on to win the election.
Now, Dr. Arnn, as a biographer of both Churchill and Lincoln, you know that spouses are integral to careers. Julia Grant has emerged as a woman of strong character and no small ambition. What do you understand about her role in his decision to seek political life?
Well, what a great woman she was. I mean, first of all, he had a military career is hard on a woman because you move all the time, and your husband's gone a lot when there's actual fighting. And then her life was difficult before that because he had a lot of trouble making a living. He had a store, failed. He had a farm. He couldn't farm to save his life, hardly. And so this is a strong woman, a tough woman. And, the drinking problems thing, which I think are real. But, there's, go back 150 years and find out how drunk a guy was. It's not easy. Winston Churchill has the same rumors about him. Anyway, if those are true, that he had spells when he didn't have much to do, and he got depressed and he got to drinking. Well, she had to do all of that too, and then she made a great first lady. I mean, she was something else.
Now, in terms of, I got to tell the one bit of historical fact that most impressed the fetching Mrs. Hewitt thus far, though perhaps in an unusual way. He would take son Fred to war with him. at the age of 12. He was actually wounded by a bullet, I believe, at Missionary Ridge. That was a little bit unusual, wasn't it, Professor Carrington?
Yes, it was. And I think you all have to understand their particular history, how hard it was on the family and on Grant when they were separated. In fact, that was often a trigger for his drinking, was when there wasn't much going on, but also when his family wasn't there. And I think his wife understood that and understood that it was better for the family generally to take that risk of being together for their help. And part of this was an interesting story is Julia comes from a Southern aristocrat family in Missouri. Grant comes from a hardcore abolitionist family in the North, and they didn't get along. So when they tried to stay with family, it was often really hard. So I think for the integrity of the family, sometimes you have to make certain choices in the context. And I think she was certainly worried in those instances, but thought that having the family together was better for her husband and her family.
So they plunge into politics, perhaps having plunged through the terror of war, and I mean really plunged into war. They are on the outskirts of Vicksburg when famine and death is all around. They are a hard lot. They take it on. They win. How close was the campaign, Professor? Was it that brought Grant? Was it a wipeout?
Are you speaking of Vicksburg or the Civil War?
No, the first election, when he won the election.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was hearing about Vicksburg and thought, well, that was a pretty wipeout. He won a dominant electoral vote count. He won about a little under 53% of the popular vote, and that was a surprise and a little bit of a worry for Republicans because they thought, given that this was in the shadow of the Civil War, that the Democratic Party would be so seen, especially in the North, as still connected with rebellion and with slavery, that it would be even a bigger win. But I would say that it still was a solid victory and gave him a starting point for what became an extraordinary task as president in trying to continue Reconstruction and do the many tasks of keeping the peace after the war had been concluded.
Now, Mississippi, Texas, and Virginia didn't get to participate. So if they'd actually had readmission at that point, doubtfully would have won the popular vote, correct?
Well, it depends upon how much African Americans would have been able to participate. Most historians believe, actually, that Grant lost the white vote nationally, which was a surprise. I mean, obviously he wasn't going to do great in the South, but that he really won on African American votes. But how competitive the Republicans were going to be in the South really hinged on two things. The biggest was, will African Americans be able to freely vote? And two, will white unionists be able to do so as well? So I think it would have been probably a lot closer. But later, Virginia went for Grant in 1872. I think it really depends upon the sub-question of how do you integrate and protect African Americans in that polity. If you do it well, then those states could still be competitive. If you don't, then I think it would have been a lock for the Democrats.
In 1868, Reconstruction is just getting started. Has the oppression of the freedmen begun with the Klan by 1868? Was it already in full swing with the rise of the re-enslavement de facto underway in the South?
By 1868, it absolutely had been. The rise, and it was begun by Nathan Bedford Forrest, one of the most brilliant and, let's say, morally challenged in certain ways of the Confederate generals, someone who really, I think, just loved war in a way that I think is a little troubling.
I think he's a terrorist based upon the execution of prisoners of war because they were freed slaves. I just think he's a terrorist.
He was, like I said, brilliant, and just because you have intellectual qualities doesn't mean you have moral virtue.
True.
And at that point, yes, and it was a cooperation, actually. There were a number of groups, but especially the Ku Klux Klan, that were bringing a wave of terror on the South and intimidating voting and you had Southern governments basically turning a blind eye, allowing them to be the enforcers, and seriously undermining whether you could have free Republican government in the South at that point.
In the next segment, we are going to focus on exactly what happened to the hopes of the freedmen. Very quickly dashed. And then what Grant did in the final segment during his presidency to assist them and the country's reunification. Stand by, America. It's Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
If you're an attorney, is there a job? Is there a job more important than this one? I mean, is it more prestigious than to defend any president in a Senate impeachment trial? Bruce Castor again. Video cut one. Play cut.
House managers who spoke earlier were brilliant speakers. And I made some notes, and they'll hear about what I think about some of the things they said later when I'm closing the case. But I thought they were brilliant speakers, and I loved listening to them. And they're smart fellas.
Okay, I'm going to get preachy now. Don't ever, if you are in a setting, whether it's a high school debate club or the most important trial of the century, the second impeachment of a president who happens to have left office, don't sing the praises of the other team. How you love listening to them and how great they were. Unless, can you guess? Unless you're better than them. If you're going to crush them with your rhetoric, with your argument, with your evidence, with your style, with your tone, with your delivery, then you can do it. Then you can risk it. Even then, not advisable.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
What's with these Republicans? I would just give $1 and a donut to figure out what's in the mind of somebody like Senator Bill Cassidy. Here's cut 5. This is the same guy who was last week, just the other day, on with Meet the Press and Chuck Todd.
The president wasn't there. He wasn't allowed counsel. They didn't amass evidence. In 5 hours, they kind of judged, and boom, he's impeached. Now, I'm told that under the Watergate, under the Clinton impeachments, there were truckloads of information. Here, it was a video. There was no process. I mean, it's almost like, if it happened in the Soviet Union, you would have called it a show trial.
That's the guy. That was last week. That's the guy who yesterday voted with the Democrats to proceed with the trial because he didn't like Bruce Castor. And listen, Bruce Castor did a terrible job. President Trump was said to be very angry behind the scenes. Fox News quotes sources as saying Trump was furious and beyond angry over his defense team's showing on day 1 of his second impeachment trial, despite his ultimate acquittal almost certain. The sources who spent time with President Trump said he was particularly incensed with the effort thus far by his attorney, Bruce Castor. Do you get the feeling that the reason he hasn't had a strong showing by his lawyers is because no attorney wants to touch this thing?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We already know that tech companies were interfering in the 2020 election significantly. Little did we know there was both private and public pressure to have the tech companies act as political referees to the benefit of Joe Biden and the Democrats. The most interfered with election in American history. Let me say that again. It was the most interfered with election in American history. From the private interests to the tech interests.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and Professor Adam Carrington, also of Hillsdale. All things Hillsdale collected at hillsdale.edu. Dr. Arnn, I'll turn to you first. How quickly did Reconstruction fall apart and into a renewed and different sort of bondage for the freedmen in the South?
Well, right away. There were so many problems at the beginning. And, there were a lot of ups and downs in Reconstruction. There was a lot of success, but, along with a lot of failure. First of all, we're not set up in America to force large segments of the population to do anything. It's a free country. It's supposed to be, right? And so that, that meant they deployed the military. They did that early because of a congressional bill that Andrew Johnson vetoed, and then the Republican Congress passed it over his veto. But they needed that, right? Because what force is there in America? I mean, God forbid that we build a national permanent bureaucracy to tell people what to do all the time, all over the country. And, we're on our way toward that. So they used the military, which, in my opinion, I don't know what Adam thinks, but my opinion is that was the right thing to do, in part because at some point it could be over. But then on the other hand, Lincoln says that wonderful thing, a near universal opinion, I don't have the exact quote, cannot, in a free country, in a representative country, cannot be safely ignored. Well, they're going to use some force, and they should have, and it worked a lot, and it didn't work a lot.
And I've got to ask you, Dr. Arnn, Paul Bremer made an infamous decision in the occupation of Iraq to disband the Iraqi army, and chaos engulfed the country for a decade, and only the surge stopped it. Was there any similar enormous consequential error at any point in Reconstruction?
I don't know. I'll turn to Adam about that. What I know is it was a mess. And Grant, by the way, in the immediate aftermath of the war, when he was still the Union commander and in the field, he was very effective at deploying troops to protect the freed African Americans.
So, Professor Carrington, was there any single thing, or was just the scope of the challenge too great and the hatred among former enslaver and newly freed people too vast?
I think it's hard to pinpoint one failure. There's not really a silver bullet, and I think a lot of people sometimes try to do this with Reconstruction and other things. But no, I don't think that there was one silver bullet. You can quibble with certain things. A lot of it, too, the other issue is how the North finally got tired. And we sometimes blame them for that, of being tired and wanting to move on. And to a certain extent, that's absolutely true, given what was going on with fellow citizens in the South. But this is also a part of the country itself that had been bled dry, had lost so many people, had given so much that there was a bit of an exhaustion too. I think Dr. Arnn is right that there's a limit to how the extent you can change in such a short period of time, such an entrenched mindset and culture. And I think some very good things were done and some very effective things were done, but I don't think the North had the will, nor was it politically possible, given the conditions in the South, to do a whole lot more than I think what was tried in that time frame.
Last question in this segment quickly, Professor Carrington. How strong did the Klan eventually become? What was its apex?
Its apex was really 1868 to 1870, 1871, and there were points where, especially parts of South Carolina, it basically dominated politics, it dominated social life. you could not really move other than being in conformity with the Klan, so much so that the last time we have had a suspension of habeas corpus was Grant doing so in 9 counties in South Carolina because the Klan had basically taken over from the normal government, and it was such a terror that they had to go in with those extreme measures to shut it down. So really they had become the de facto rulers of much of the South at that point.
When we come back, the Grant presidency, what it should be known for, what it is known for, a summary with Professor Adam Carrington and President of Hillsdale College, Larry Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu, our great sponsors. Stay tuned.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
They equate believing that the election was illegitimate with treason and being an insurrectionist and so on. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what my side believes or your side believes. I care the way people act. How many Democrats believe that the election was not stolen from Hillary Clinton? The whole point of the Russian collusion lie was to prove that it was an illegitimate election. Putin won, remember? Putin, not Trump. Telling all Americans over and over and over police are racist does not lead to fatal riots, the burning down of businesses and police cars. That does not lead to that. But this is a cover-up for the violence of the left. That's the way it should be regarded. I wish we had the male-female hour today. I apologize to you. I apologize to me. I apologize to males and females listening. I cannot control the events outside. I can only control how I react. And this is a time of crisis wherein my normal programming is deferred.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
So you're Donald Trump, and it appears you lost the election. But you're hanging by a thread. There's a shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a speech, an incendiary speech. I'm going to make a whole bunch of my supporters go insane, go berserk. I'll send them to the Capitol building. They'll trash the place. The Democrats will go, oh my goodness, I guess Donald Trump is really, really serious about believing the election was stolen. Maybe we should take a look at this. We take another look at it. The evidence is overwhelming. The election was stolen. Let's have him stay there 4 more years. Really? I know what I'll do. I'll send a whole bunch of my supporters. I'll trash the place, put a lot of negative footage up there, and Americans are going to go, you know what? If this man doesn't get 4 more years, he'll burn the whole country down, so let's keep him there. Really? You think that looked good for him? You think that advanced his agenda? Think having that little idiot with the Viking hat help Donald Trump 4 more years down the road? And the story came out, says the guy's sorry. Said I should have been better dressed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about this. It was very serious and very scary. And people died and people got injured. And Donald Trump wanted that? He was hoping it would happen? Really? That's how much you hate this guy?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and Adam Carrington, professor of history at Hillsdale College. And we have finally come to the Grant administration. And when he took office, violence in the South of the sort we just talked about, South Carolina in open rebellion, no GOP in the South, and the North exhausted and somewhat broke. So how did he go about it, Adam Carrington? What did Grant do as president that we ought to remember and celebrate?
I think that even with limited resources, even with a massive task of the resistance he was up against, I think he marshaled all of his forces, all the forces at his constitutional disposal to do what he could in the South. And there were a series of enforcement acts that he pushed for Congress. He was a vigorous defender of the 15th Amendment that gave voting rights, or said that one could not discriminate voting on the basis of previous slavery or race. And he actually was able to do some remarkable things. The 1872 election was the freest and most protected election in the South until the 1960s. And he was able to basically, through some swift, decisive prosecutions and military intervention, to break the Klan. The Klan we think of in the 20th century was actually a restarting of the Ku Klux Klan. He was able to break it in its first iteration, and for a time was able to truly give at least at least a taste of how the principles of the Declaration of Independence should have been played out in a republic where all men are considered created equal.
And Dr. Arnn, people associate the 14th Amendment wrongly with Lincoln. It's a Grant Amendment, and they don't. And the Supreme Court butchered it with the slaughterhouse cases. It's Clarence Thomas has the clearest view of what it ought to have been. It did not become that, but by ways diverse and complicated, it's getting closer to what it was intended to do on race, and it's gone full expansion on other areas. But it is a Grant achievement, not a Lincoln achievement.
That's right. Well, everything after 1860 is a Lincoln achievement.
Okay, well put. Well put.
But yeah, and what the Civil Rights Act overturned in two sets of cases, the slaughterhouse cases and the civil rights cases, what it did is a brilliant distinction, and that is, if because how much can the government control private action? And that's, a sensitive question in a liberal society where people are supposed to be free. And so the line that it drew was, if you announce that you're letting the public in, you got to let them in. And that means restaurants and accommodations and everywhere people go in public where people open their doors and say, come in and buy something or come in and do something. And the attempt to enforce that, and that looked to me like, it's always looked to me like that would have worked. And the Supreme Court overturned it, and they took this distorted view of the 14th Amendment in doing so.
And we've been working our way back to what was the intention of it by crazy means since then.
Yeah,
because they gutted the Privileges and Immunities Clause.
That's right. Because equal protection of the law is the place to put all that stuff, because obviously that's what equal protection of the law means. And they took that away, the Supreme Court did, and that's right. And Clarence Thomas, who's the greatest, he's the one who's articulated how we should go back to that case and start back over and use the Equal Protection Clause because it gives a much clearer guidance.
And the Privileges and Immunities Clause. It was a very easy to understand act, and it was a very easy to understand amendment. And the Supreme Court has truly bollocked it up. And incorporation doctrine I've taught this forever, and the students look at me and wonder at how the Supreme Court could have gotten it wrong. And Adam Carrington, had the Supreme Court reverted in part to its Dred Scott-like days of trying to interfere with the emancipation of the freedmen?
Well, I think in some ways they reinstated Dred Scott in a minor way as far as citizenship of state versus citizenship of nation with Slaughterhouse. But I think that the minor defense I'll give them, which is building off something that Dr. Arnn said, is they were concerned about the future of federalism. Typically, the protection of life, liberty, property, your natural rights had been mostly done by the states. There was a worry that the states were going to be overwhelmed and swallowed up by the national government, by the force of the Civil War plus these new amendments. And they were trying to draw a line that preserved a role for the states. I think in doing so, though, they misunderstood how utter neglect by a local government to protect the life, liberty, and property of its citizens and persons is a derogation of its duty, and I think could be seen as not following its own the mandate to give equal protection of the law. So I think it had a good worry it had, more than it wasn't merely race, it wasn't merely these other things it's been accused of, but they drew the line too cautiously and didn't realize the damage it was doing to the freedmen and to the attempt to build a true Republican government in the South.
And so how much people don't know that Section 1983, which remains the great federal bulwark against out-of-control states, is actually born of the Grant administration. And so when we see Section 1983 actions brought today, and they are brought all over the United States all the time to restrain the actions of state and local officials who are violating federal constitutional right, that's a Grant-era law. It's part of the KKK Act, but it's a Grant-era law. Is there another part of the Grant legacy that we ought to hold on to, Professor, and hold up?
I think his character is something to remember, that character matters and the man that holds an office matters, and that while he was an imperfect man, we haven't talked about how he wasn't always the best judge of character and who he hired or worked with, but it was more his own innocence. He was a man unflinchingly dedicated to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. He was unflinchingly dedicated to the American Republic and the Constitution. And he was a man, unlike many in the history of the world, who served because he believed it was his duty as a citizen and as a human being. And I think men like that need to be celebrated as much as we can, because they're always fewer than we need.
And that's why the Grant Renaissance, Dr. Arnn, and it's a great place to end with your comments about, is so timely, and it's launched by Chernow. And now people are beginning to realize that when he wrote the best memoir ever penned by a president, it's about his Civil War days. He was dying and could barely swallow water because of throat cancer. And he had lived a consequential post-presidency, but history has distorted it because of his drinking, because of Professor Carrington just mentioned his almost inevitable trusting of the wrong people. But he was a great man, and it came through in his memoir.
Yeah, well, the scandals about Grant in his presidency are, people gave him things, personal things, a house, for example. And that wasn't against the style back in those days. And there's no evidence that he ever did anything for them in exchange. But some of them were not good people. And that's what Adam said about not being a good judge of character. On the other hand, his story is kind of like Harry Truman's, right? When Harry Truman finished being president, he went by himself with his wife to the train station and got on a train, went home, lived in the house he'd always lived in. And Grant fell into hard times. Grant was never any good at money. And he had to write that autobiography urgently to get some money for his family after he died.
Because he'd been swindled by a business partner. He had lost everything.
Yeah, he was not, if he had been that foolish, we would have never, in war, we would have never won the Civil War. And that's just that's the thing about him. Quick characters are in a range. But I mentioned earlier, a fella who has a long career and stands up beautifully, despite some exceptions all through it, that's a very rare thing. And we rightly respect and honor people who achieve that.
And I wonder then if we can close. He is also a beautiful writer, and his military career is marked by brevity and clarity as well as command of battlefields and armies, but his dispatches. And then he sits down to write as he's dying, and he does 350,000 words. And Mark Twain denies that he had much of an editorial role, though he had a great role as publisher. He just basically dictated through a cancer-engorged throat what is a genius bit of work.
Yeah. And that, that mental capacity, because that's a grand thing to be able to do. And what you said about his orders, right, they reflect a habit of mind and a capacity of mind. In a battle, big, bloody, something awful, Battle of Shiloh, for example, was just going completely wrong, and Grant was on the wrong side of the river. And everybody was running away. And he just saw the nub of it, and he turned it around, and it turned into, something better than a stalemate.
He did that on many second days of battles. And Missionary Ridge, he was a second-day wizard.
See, think how much that takes. Two things, right? Courage. There's a terrible temptation for generals to panic because they don't want their army destroyed. And it can happen in a hurry, right? So he had courage. And because he had courage, he could think. And he could grasp the nub of the problem. Well, that autobiography, he has a wonderful understanding of what he ought to be talking about, what you need to know. And it's just, so he's just an extremely insightful human being.
And it sold, and it sold, and it sold. It did save his family, and it has gone down as the best bit of writing by a president other than the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address. I'll put that in there for Jefferson and Lincoln's sake, Dr. Arnn. I want to thank Professor Carrington. Come back early and often, Professor Carrington. And Dr. Arnn, thank you as well. 2 weeks of Grant that will stand on their own for a very long time of the Hillsdale Dialogue. Everything Hillsdale is collected at hillsdale.edu. All of our conversations about all of our subjects going back are at hughforhillsdale.com. We come back with John Winthrop next week, and then eventually we're going to turn to great figures in history, but we've got to do a little bit more pre-constitutional origins of it. We've done the laws of Virginia, we've done the Mayflower Compact and the Salem Convention, and then we're going to turn to John Winthrop and a couple of more things, and of course, Thomas Paine. Then we will go to great figures. We have a plan, and if you stick with us week in and week out, you'll get a taste of Hillsdale. But what you really want to do is go to hillsdale.edu and watch its video courses. Use it to teach your children in this period of shutdown. And if you have a senior, go and get an application and try and get them into the Lantern of the North, Hillsdale College, hillsdale.edu. Let me turn now to another sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, ReliefFactor.com. I tell you about it every week, and I want you to know about it. It is a wonderful sponsor of the show, but it's also a wonderful supplement to healthy living. I take it every day because I carry it in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega are what matters in supporting the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. The only supplement I take my vitamins, especially my vitamin D in this period of the virus, but I always take ReliefFactor.com because I want my weekends to be full of movement and exercise and to have as little discomfort as possible when I'm done exercising and moving around. And so should you. So especially if you are a member of the Weekend Warrior Club, or if you're getting older and you're definitely in the latter and you probably should be in the former, go to ReliefFactor.com right now. Change your weekend, change your life. $19.95 is a 3-week starter pack. Senator Marco Rubio is next, America. Stay tuned.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Parler, which is still not active, thanks to a three-pronged attack from the corporatist elite, Amazon, Apple, and Google, they knocked Parler off the face of the earth. Parler is being blamed for not moderating their content ahead of the January 6th tragedy. I saw some of the posts that were put on Parler. Some of them were disgusting and gross. But Parler's a startup company. To put all the pressure on them to monitor everything that was put on their application is completely and totally unfair. But Democrats now want to know their private conversations. They are subpoenaing. Is that a word? Subpoenaing? Okay. Doesn't flow as nicely. They're issuing subpoenas to Parler, and they're putting a full court press on Parler. They are even alleging that possibly Parler was bribing Trump because they wanted to give him a part of the company while he was president, or after he was president, they were having the conversation. However, new information now shows that Facebook, not Parler, played the largest role in the Capitol Hill riot. New data from the American Department of Justice shows that despite the media and big tech campaign against Parler, it was Facebook which served as the top rallying point for those storming the Capitol building on January the 6th, Forbes reports. This is The Post-Millennial by Noah David Alter Toronto.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thank you, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
Since you have been last on, the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump has begun. Earlier this week, you voted not to conduct the trial. I'm not sure if that was on constitutional or prudential grounds. Have you changed your view since then, given the evidence that's been presented?
Well, frankly, it was on both grounds. Even assuming Congress did have the constitutional power to impeach and remove a former official, it shouldn't. And here's why. It's the creation of a new political weapon that we will see used. We'll regret creating that weapon. One day it'll be used by a Democratic Senate to disqualify a former cabinet member who wants to challenge a Democratic incumbent. One day it'll be used by a future Republican Senate to disqualify a Democratic vice president from running for president. We'll regret creating that tool. Donald Trump is now a private citizen, and if in fact he has committed crimes, as the House managers claim he has, then he is answerable to the civil and criminal courts of this country, no longer to the Senate.
It is true that a president in office may not be prosecuted. It is also true that a former president may be prosecuted for crimes committed in office. You're absolutely right. Senator, I have always said that Article 2, Section 4 is plain on its face, that it does not apply to former officials. Do you retain that view that Judge Luttig is the best exponent of, although there are others, and there are also some very fine conservatives like Mike McConnell and Chuck Cooper who've argued the other case? I know it's a divided question. I just don't think it's a hard one.
Well, yesterday we were encouraged to use our common sense. Common sense tells you in the plain reading of those words a couple things. The first is that at that time, not only did the British and in England did they have impeachment trials for former officials, they had impeachment trials for private citizens. And the Constitution made pretty clear in the words, in the plain reading of those words, that they rejected that view because they didn't include it. It didn't say current and former officials. It just said officials. That's the first point. The second is that the logic tells you that if the primary purpose of the primary remedy of the measure is no longer available, it's the equivalent of saying that there's going to court and saying, well, it's being dismissed because the relief cannot be granted. It's not a possibility. You can't give the death penalty to someone who's died. You can't remove from office someone who's no longer in office.
So, Senator, have any of your colleagues indicated to you they have changed their preliminary vote from earlier this week, or do you believe there will be 44 votes to acquit minimum?
I don't believe there'll be 44. I mean, I don't believe that the president will be convicted, but I think there's this false choice that's being presented, and that is unless you vote to convict, you are endorsing the events of January 6th, which I rejected minutes after it started, consistently since then. All of the evidence presented this week, virtually all of it, I was aware of. I was impacted by seeing it again. It stirred up anger in me. But if we've learned anything from this experience, it should be that we should not be driven to make decisions on the basis of anger, because it leads you to make destructive decisions. And in my mind, it would be destructive to this country to create a new political weapon, which is impeachment used against former officials who are answerable to the courts of this country like any other private citizen.
I agree with all that. I'm just looking for your assessment of the caucus. Do you know of anyone who has changed their position since Tuesday?
I don't, but again, I haven't asked everyone, and it's possible that someone might have in one direction or in another. I don't know. Obviously, the arguments are not complete. We'll see what they present today, and we could go into a bunch of other arguments that some have focused on about the hypocrisy embedded in all this. I mean, one of the House managers, I think, tweeted something like "boo-hoo" when Susan Collins was being attacked in her home by people who clearly, had they gotten their hands on her, might have done physical harm and things of that nature. But I prefer not to spend too much time on those issues because, frankly, to me, the elementary issue is whether we should be using this weapon the way we are or not, and my answer is we shouldn't.
Now, there is one last question I want you to expand on. Of course, the Constitution commits legitimate impeachments to the Senate, and that's explicit. However, nowhere else in American law, not in civil, not in criminal, not in any administrative proceeding, not even in a high school student council disciplinary proceeding, do we ever let victims serve as jurors and judges in the case of Senator Leahy. There's no way around it here. If you're going to conduct an impeachment trial, it has to be conducted by the Senate. But has it taught you anything about due process and why we have so many guardrails on the rights of the accused in every other setting, both legal and non-legal?
Well, I think what it should remind everybody of is that this is not a jury trial. This is not a judicial proceeding. It has judicial-looking elements to it, but it is not. I mean, I read these people that say, oh, you're a juror, you need to sit there. And I thought the best line was Tim Scott's, which says he's as impartial as the other 99 people are. You're absolutely right. I mean, the unique aspect to this one is that every single juror in this case is not just partial. In essence, I think almost every senator has given an indication of how they intend to vote, including the presiding officer. But every single senator was, for the most part, both a witness and a victim of all of this. And so it's very unique. This is a political process. Impeachment is a political process that has some judicial trappings to it, but it is not a judicial process. It just isn't.
And quickly, Senator, when do you expect it to be over?
Well, I think it appears from press reports that the president's lawyers are going to wrap up today and get the questions, so it's possible that we could have a vote as early as tomorrow night or maybe Sunday morning, it looks like.
That would be a good thing. Senator Rubio, thank you for coming back. I look forward to continued conversations, and a happy President's Day to you and to successful legislating after this is behind us. Thank you, America. Thank you, Dwayne and Harley. Thank you, Adam and Ben. Thanks, all of you. Enjoy your long weekend. I'll be back live on Tuesday, but Monday, our President's Show with Richard Norton Smith. Do not miss it.